Chosen one, something extraordinary happens when you recognize who you truly are in Christ. It's no accident you're watching this video right now. There's a calling on your heart, a stirring in your soul, a quest for something deeper that has led you here. In a world filled with chaos and uncertainty, where so many people are adrift, you're part of a special group, those who carry a unique and powerful sign in their lives. This isn't a sign visible to the naked eye. It's not a mark on your skin, a symbol you wear, or something that can be photographed. It's something deeper, more meaningful, and infinitely more powerful. It's the unmerited favor of God operating in your life in ways that often defy human understanding. While many struggle against the current of life, you experience an unseen force opening doors where there seem to be no way. While others despair before closed doors, you witness doors opening in unexpected ways. This is the divine sign of the chosen, the supernatural favor that transforms lives and impacts the world around you. Before we continue, if you feel this message is speaking directly to your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment saying, "I carry God's favor." This simple act is a declaration that you recognize the special sign in your life. What we're about to explore together isn't a new concept or a modern philosophy. It's a timeless truth that transcends generations, cultures, and eras. From ancient times recorded in the Holy Scriptures to the present day, there have always been people who carried this divine sign. Ordinary people who lived extraordinary lives because of God's favor working through them. In these next few minutes, we'll delve into the depths of this life-changing truth. We'll explore what it means to carry the divine sign as one of God's chosen. We'll discover how to recognize this favor in your life, how to cultivate it, and how to allow it to flow through you to impact not only your own journey, but also the lives of those around you. Prepare your heart for a revelation that can completely change your perspective on who you are and the purpose you carry in this world. Chosen one, the first and perhaps most important characteristic that defines those who carry the divine sign is the ability to recognize God's favor in their lives. This isn't a supernatural or mystical ability. It's a trained eye, a spiritual sensitivity that allows you to see beyond coincidences and perceive God's hand working in the details. It's like having a special vision in a world where many walk as if blindfolded. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to notice the blessings in their lives, while others, even receiving the same blessings, remain blind to them? Why do some perceive openings, opportunities, and provisions, where others only see obstacles, limitations, and scarcity? The difference isn't in the quantity of blessings received, but in the ability to recognize them. Many of us go through life receiving God's favor daily, but without ever realizing it. It's like living in a house full of treasures without ever opening the chests. Recognizing God's favor is the first step to living as a true chosen one. But how do you develop this keen perception? How do you train your spiritual eyes to identify God's favor, even in the most ordinary circumstances? The first step is to cultivate a heart of gratitude. Gratitude is like a lens that clarifies our spiritual vision. When we start to give thanks for the small things, our ability to perceive God's favor increases exponentially. An ungrateful person can receive the greatest blessings and still remain unsatisfied, while a grateful person transforms even the smallest gifts into a reason for celebration. The Book of Psalms teaches us, "Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise." Psalm 100.4 NKJV. This isn't just an instruction for worship. It's a key to accessing a deeper dimension of recognizing God's favor. When gratitude becomes your daily language, the signs of God's favor begin to become more evident in your life. Another fundamental aspect of recognizing God's favor is developing the habit of intentional reflection. In our age of constant distractions, we rarely stop to reflect on our days, our journeys, our paths. Many of us live on autopilot, rushing from one task to another, without ever really processing our experiences. The chosen ones, however, develop the habit of pausing and reflecting. They look back and identify moments where doors opened inexplicably, where resources appeared at just the right moment, where chance encounters changed the course of their lives. Have you experienced situations like this, Moments where everything seemed to align in a way that defied the odds. That job interview that came up when you were about to give up. That friend who called exactly when you needed to hear a word of encouragement. That unexpected solution that appeared for a seemingly unsolvable problem. These aren't mere coincidences. They're manifestations of God's favor in your life. And when you begin to recognize them as such, something extraordinary happens. Your expectation increases, your faith is strengthened, and your perception becomes even more sharpened. It's a virtuous cycle where the recognition of favor leads to a greater ability to recognize it, which in turn opens space for even more evident manifestations of this favor in your life. Remember, God's favor isn't something you earn by your own merit. It's a gracious gift. However, your ability to recognize it and experience it fully is directly related to your willingness to see it. The truly chosen ones aren't necessarily those who receive more, but those who recognize what they've already received. Chosen one, to deeply understand what it means to carry the divine sign of favor, let's look into the sacred pages, where we find vivid examples of ordinary people who lived extraordinary lives because of this special favor. These weren't superheroes or perfect beings. They were people with frailties, doubts, and flaws, just like us. What set them apart was the unmerited favor of God they carried and how they responded to it. Consider Noah, a man living in an age of widespread corruption. Scripture tells us something profoundly significant about him. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, Genesis 6:8, NKJV. In the midst of a generation that had completely gone astray, Noah carried the sign of God's favor. This favor didn't exempt him from facing the greatest natural disaster in history, nor did it spare him the hard work of building the ark, much less protect him from the ridicule and mockery of his contemporaries. However, it was this same favor that preserved him when judgment came, that guided him in the construction of the ark, and that sustained him during the long days of the flood. The divine favor on Noah didn't mean the absence of challenges. It meant provision of resources and direction in the midst of challenges. Think of Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, falsely accused and unjustly imprisoned. A story that begins with such tragedy seemed destined for a sad ending. However, the Bible repeats a revealing phrase about Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. Genesis 39:2, 21, 23, NKJV. This is the divine sign of the chosen, the presence and favor of God, even in the most adverse circumstances. This favor didn't prevent Joseph from experiencing betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment, but it transformed each of these experiences into stepping stones that led him to his ultimate purpose. Even in prison, God's favor was so evident on Joseph that the jailer entrusted him with the administration of the entire prison. The favor didn't immediately get him out of prison, but it caused him to prosper even there. And when the time was right, that same favor lifted him from prison to the palace in a single day. And what about Esther, a young orphaned exile who became queen of one of the greatest powers of the ancient world? The narrative of her life is filled with divine coincidences that reveal God's favor operating behind the scenes. Her strategic positioning in the palace wasn't an accident. It was God's favor preparing the way for the salvation of an entire nation. When Esther needed to risk her own life to intercede for her people, the favor that accompanied her inclined the king's heart in her favor. Esther obtained favor in the sight of the king. Esther 5:2, NKJV. Observe Mary, a simple young woman from an insignificant town, receiving the greeting of the angel Gabriel. Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you. Luke 1:28, NKJV. God's favor placed Mary in a unique position in history, but it didn't exempt her from facing social stigma, suspicion about her pregnancy, the difficult journey to Bethlehem, the flight to Egypt, and finally, the indescribable pain of seeing her son crucified. Favor didn't eliminate the challenges, but it sustained Mary through them and transformed her into a channel for the greatest miracle in history. These examples show us consistent patterns about how God's favor operates in the lives of the chosen. It's not a magic potion that eliminates problems, but a sustaining presence that transforms problems into platforms. It's not a shield that prevents all adversity, but a strength that empowers us to overcome any adversity. It's not a shortcut that exempts us from hard work, but a grace that makes our work fruitful beyond what would be naturally possible. And you, chosen one, carry this same divine sign. Chosen one, the second striking characteristic of those who carry the divine sign is an unwavering faith, an extraordinary trust that remains steadfast even when everything around seems to crumble. This isn't blind or irrational faith, but a confidence deeply rooted in the knowledge that God's favor is at work in your life. It's like being in a fierce storm, knowing that your vessel was built to withstand any raging sea. The connection between God's favor and unwavering faith is powerful and transformative. The more you recognize God's favor in your life, the more your faith is strengthened, and the stronger your faith becomes, the more you're able to attract and manifest that favor. It's a virtuous cycle that elevates your spiritual life to a new level. But how exactly does God's favor strengthen your faith? The process begins with the accumulated experiences of God's favor on your journey. Each time you identify a door opened by God's favor, each unexpected provision, each inexplicable deliverance, these moments become milestones in your spiritual memory. They are like memorial stones that you can revisit in times of uncertainty. Think of David facing Goliath. What gave a young shepherd the courage to face a giant warrior who terrorized entire armies? It was his vivid recollection of God's favor in previous experiences. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. 1 Samuel 17:37, NKJV. The favor experienced in the past became the foundation for his unwavering faith in the present. You have your own stories of defeated lions and bears, moments where God's favor manifested in undeniable ways in your life. These aren't just good memories. They are anchors for your faith in times of storm. When new Goliaths arise in your path, you can look back and say with confidence, "The same favor that brought me here will continue to sustain me onward." Another way God's favor strengthens your faith is by creating a different perspective on challenges. When you live consciously aware of God's favor in your life, you begin to see obstacles not as insurmountable barriers, but as opportunities for new manifestations of that favor. It's as if each problem becomes a stage where God's favor can shine in surprising ways. The Apostle Paul exemplified this perspective when he declared, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Philippians 4:13, NKJV. This wasn't a statement of self-sufficiency, but a declaration of someone who lived constantly aware of God's favor, operating through him. Paul experienced imprisonments, beatings, shipwrecks, and persecutions, but his confidence never wavered because it was anchored in something deeper than circumstances, the unchanging favor of God. This unwavering faith doesn't mean the absence of momentary doubts or questions. Even great bearers of God's favor had their moments of uncertainty. What differentiates them isn't the total absence of doubts, but the refusal to allow these doubts to determine their decisions and actions. They continue to move forward despite uncertainties, sustained by the deep certainty of the favor they carry. When you recognize that you carry the divine sign, your posture towards adversities changes radically. Instead of anxiously asking, "Will I be able to overcome this?" you confidently declare, "The favor that accompanies me is greater than any challenge I face." This isn't a confidence in your own abilities, but in the divine favor that operates through you. It's a faith that recognizes your total dependence on God, but that simultaneously affirms the inexhaustible provision of His grace. This is the unwavering faith of the chosen, not based on favorable circumstances, but on the certainty of God's favor that remains constant in any circumstance. Chosen one, there are moments in the lives of those who carry the divine sign that simply cannot be explained by conventional logic or natural laws. These are situations where God's favor manifests in such an extraordinary way that even the most skeptical are forced to recognize that something beyond the ordinary is happening. This is the supernatural impact of God's favor, the third striking characteristic of the chosen. We're not talking about magic tricks or bizarre occurrences, but divine interventions that defy the odds and transcend merely human explanations. Have you experienced situations like this? Moments where doors opened in ways that defied all logic? Circumstances where resources appeared from unexpected sources exactly when you needed them most? Occasions where you received exactly the guidance needed at the critical moment. These are manifestations of the supernatural impact of God's favor in your life. Consider the biblical account of Daniel in the lion's den. Natural logic dictated a catastrophic outcome. A defenseless man, thrown into a den with hungry lions, could only have a tragic end. However, the divine favor that Daniel carried produced a result that completely defied that logic. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. Daniel 6:22, NKJV. Daniel explained to the king the next morning. God's favor didn't remove Daniel from the den. It intervened supernaturally within the very situation of danger. This pattern repeats consistently in the lives of those who carry the sign of the chosen. God's favor often doesn't take us out of the fiery furnaces and lions' dens we face. Instead, it manifests supernaturally within those situations, transforming what should be destruction into a demonstration of divine power. The supernatural impact of God's favor isn't limited to dramatic deliverances. It also manifests in extraordinary synchronicity of events, in coincidences too significant to be mere chance, in doors that open in improbable sequences, and in connections that form in ways that defy conventional explanations. Think of how Philip was supernaturally transported to meet the Ethiopian eunuch exactly when he was reading a specific passage from Isaiah and needed interpretation, Acts 8:26-40. Or how Peter was freed from prison by an angel on the eve of his execution, with doors opening on their own before him, Acts 12:6-11. Or how Paul and Silas, after being beaten and imprisoned, experienced an earthquake at midnight that not only freed them, but also led to the conversion of the jailer and his family, Acts 16:25-34. These aren't fairy tales, they are historical, examples of the supernatural impact of God's favor in the lives of the chosen. The amazing thing is that this same favor operates even today in equally extraordinary ways in the lives of those who carry the divine sign. It's important to understand that the supernatural impact of God's favor isn't primarily aimed at impressing other people or providing exciting experiences. Its purpose is to fulfill God's designs and manifest God's glory in situations where human solutions prove insufficient. When the waters of the Red Sea parted before Israel, it wasn't just to provide an exciting experience, but to fulfill the divine purpose of liberating a people and manifesting God's glory in a way that would be remembered for generations. Similarly, when God's favor operates supernaturally in your life, there's always a greater purpose at stake. Sometimes that purpose is revealed immediately, other times it only becomes clear with the passage of time. But there's always a divine design behind the supernatural impact of the favor you carry. As a chosen one, you don't need to force supernatural manifestations or create unrealistic expectations. Simply live each day conscious of God's favor that accompanies you, and be alert to recognize when that favor manifests in ways that transcend human logic. Chosen one, there's a common misunderstanding about what it means to carry God's favor. Many imagine that this special sign should function as a magic shield that repels all hardship, all suffering, all trials. But the truth is much deeper and more powerful. God's favor doesn't necessarily exempt us from challenges. It manifests in an extraordinary way precisely in the midst of challenges. It's in the storms that the divine sign shines with greater intensity. This is a paradoxical truth, but fundamental for understanding the fourth characteristic of the chosen, how God's favor is revealed in difficulties. The life of Joseph perfectly illustrates this principle. Scripture repeats that the Lord was with Joseph, indicating the divine favor that accompanied him. However, Joseph's journey included being sold into slavery, being falsely accused and spending years in prison. Where was God's favor in those moments? It was operating behind the scenes, transforming each challenge into a stepping stone for his ultimate purpose. In Potiphar's house, God's favor caused Joseph to prosper even as a slave. In prison, God's favor elevated him to a position of trust, even as a prisoner. And in the right time, that same favor led him from the prison to the palace in a single, day, God's favor didn't prevent Joseph from facing extremely challenging situations, but it guaranteed that none of those situations would be the final chapter of his story. Perhaps you're going through a Joseph moment in your life, sold by those you trusted, unjustly accused, forgotten in some metaphorical prison. It may seem that God's favor is absent, but the truth is that this favor is working silently, preparing the ground for a powerful manifestation at the right time. God's favor often operates through a principle we can call divine transformation, the supernatural ability to convert obstacles into opportunities, poison into medicine, tragedy into triumph. It's like someone who masters the art of spiritual judo, using the force of the opponent's blow to generate an even more powerful counterstrike. Paul expressed this principle when he declared, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose." Romans 8:28 NKJV. Note that he didn't say that all things are good, but that all things work together for good. This is the manifestation of God's favor in difficulties, not the absence of problems, but the presence of a redemptive purpose in every problem. Another way God's favor manifests in difficulties is through the extraordinary provision of strength and resilience. There are moments in our journey where the greatest miracle isn't the removal of the challenge, but the supernatural ability to endure it and grow through it. When Paul prayed 3 times that his thorn in the flesh would be removed, the divine answer was revealing. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9 NKJV. God's favor didn't remove the thorn. It manifested as grace sufficient to live victoriously despite the thorn. In your own difficulties, the favor you carry as a chosen one may not immediately manifest as a change in external circumstances, but as an inner strength that surprises you, a peace that defies logic, a clarity that emerges amidst the chaos, a hope that persists against all odds. These are powerful manifestations of the divine sign you carry. Remember, the greatest testimonies of God's favor don't come from lives without challenges, but from lives that faced immense challenges and emerged transformed by the divine favor that accompanied them at every step. The scars you carry aren't evidence of the absence of God's favor. They are medals that testify to how this favor sustained you and led you through the darkest valleys. And it's precisely because you've traversed those valleys that your testimony of God's favor has the power to impact other lives. Chosen one of the most significant manifestations of the divine sign in your life is the progressive revelation of a clear and specific purpose. Those who carry God's favor don't wander aimlessly. They move forward with an increasingly clear understanding of why they're here and what unique contribution they were created to offer. This is the 5th characteristic of those who carry the divine sign, a sense of purpose that transcends merely personal goals or fleeting ambitions. God's favor doesn't just open doors, it illuminates paths. It doesn't just provide opportunities, it reveals directions. It's like having a spiritual GPS that continually recalibrates your route toward the destiny for which you were created. When Jeremiah heard the words, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations." Jeremiah 1:5 NKJV. He was receiving a revelation of the divine purpose for his life. This clarity of purpose didn't come through his own merit or through his ability to plan strategically. It was a manifestation of God's favor operating in his life even before his birth. The same favor operates in your life, chosen one, gradually revealing the specific calling for which you were created. Perhaps you've already experienced moments of profound clarity where you felt a perfect alignment between who you are, what you're doing, and what you were created for. That feeling of, "This is what I was born to do," isn't imagination. It's a manifestation of God's favor illuminating your purpose. Or perhaps you're still in a process of discovery, with pieces of the puzzle of your calling gradually fitting together. The important thing is to understand that God's favor is actively working in this process, using every experience, every relationship, every challenge, and every victory to clarify your unique purpose. How does God's favor reveal your purpose? Often, through a pattern of open doors and closed doors. Pay close attention to the areas of your life where doors seem to open naturally, where opportunities arise without excessive effort, where your abilities find fruitful expression. Simultaneously, notice where doors consistently close, despite your best efforts. This pattern often functions as a language through which God's favor communicates directions. Another way God's favor clarifies your purpose is through consistent confirmation. When you're on the path aligned with your calling, you tend to receive confirmations from multiple sources, words of encouragement from people who aren't always connected to each other, resources that appear at the right moment, results that exceed expectations, inner peace that persists even amidst challenges. It's as if the entire universe is conspiring in favor of what you were created for. God's favor also reveals your purpose through what we can call deep joy. Don't confuse this with superficial fun or momentary pleasure. Deep joy is that feeling of fulfillment and completeness that comes when you're operating in the center of your calling. As C.S. Lewis observed, the man who is pulling the lever that moves the world goes on the voyage of discovery with a different companion from those who are merely revolving with the handle. This grace of movement is a tangible manifestation of God's favor confirming your purpose. Understanding your purpose isn't a spiritual luxury. It's a vital necessity for those who carry the divine sign. Without this clarity, the favor operating in your life may seem random or disconnected. With this clarity, each manifestation of God's favor becomes a coherent piece of a larger mosaic, revealing a picture of meaning and purpose. The beauty is that you don't have to discover this purpose through your own effort or through self-help techniques. The same divine favor that chose you is actively revealing your calling step by step, day after day. Your responsibility is to remain attentive, responsive, and available while this purpose unfolds in your life. Chosen one, a fundamental truth about the divine sign you carry is that it was never intended to benefit you alone. God's favor in your life has a purpose that transcends your personal well-being. It was designed to flow through you and positively impact everyone around you. This is the sixth characteristic of those who carry the divine sign, a transformative influence that benefits entire communities. It's like a stone thrown into a lake, creating ripples that expand far beyond the initial point of impact. This communal dimension of God's favor is rooted in the very nature of God. When God called Abraham, he made it clear that the favor poured out on him had a greater purpose. I will bless those who bless you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Genesis 12:3 NKJV. This wasn't a promise of isolated prosperity, but a commission to become a channel of blessing to many. The same principle applies to you. The favor that accompanies you isn't an end in itself. It's a means by which divine goodness can reach people who might never enter a church or open a Bible. Observe the life of Joseph again. The divine favor that accompanied him didn't just elevate him to a position of authority in Egypt. Through him, an entire nation was saved from famine, including people from diverse regions. The same favor that sustained him in prison ended up sustaining multitudes through him. This is the consistent pattern of God's favor. It always expands beyond the initial recipient. You might be thinking, but I'm not Joseph or Abraham. I don't occupy a position of significant influence. Remember, though, that the transformative influence of God's favor doesn't depend on your social standing, your title, or your visible reach. It depends only on your availability to be a channel of that favor. Think of the anonymous servant girl of Naaman, a young Israelite captured and enslaved. Her position was humble, her influence seemingly minimal. However, a few words from her sharing her knowledge about the prophet in Israel triggered a sequence of events that led to the healing and conversion of a foreign military commander, 2 Kings 5. The divine favor she carried, even in her condition as a slave, transformed lives far beyond her immediate reach. The transformative influence that flows from God's favor in your life can manifest in countless ways. It might be through words of wisdom shared at the right time with a coworker facing a difficult decision. It might be through an act of generosity that inspires others to be more generous. It might be through the way you face adversity with grace and faith, offering a model for others going through similar struggles. Or it might be through more structured initiatives, projects, ministries, businesses, or causes that you lead or support, which channel God's favor to impact entire communities. In any of these expressions, the principle remains the same. The favor you carry as a chosen one was never intended to end with you. Your life is like a channel, not like a closed reservoir. Favor flows to you so that it can flow through you. When you understand and embrace this communal dimension of God's favor, something extraordinary happens. The impact of that favor in your own life intensifies. It's a spiritual paradox. The more you allow favor to flow through you to benefit others, the more that favor multiplies in your own life. As Jesus taught, "Give and it will be given to you. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you." Luke 6:38 NKJV. This is the divine economy of favor. It grows not when we hoard it, but when we share it. Chosen one, just as a precious plant requires specific care to fully blossom, the divine sign of favor in your life can be cultivated through intentional spiritual practices. Although God's favor is a gracious gift that can't be earned by our own merit, there are attitudes and disciplines that create an environment conducive to its fullest manifestation. Let's explore together how to cultivate and strengthen this special sign that you carry. The first and most fundamental practice is to cultivate a life of conscious gratitude. Gratitude isn't just an emotional response to blessings received. It's a spiritual posture that opens the floodgates for even greater manifestations of God's favor. As it is written, "Enter into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise," Psalm 104 NKJV. Gratitude is the gateway to a deeper experience of God's favor. When you deliberately acknowledge and give thanks for the favor already manifested in your life, you're essentially declaring, "I'm attentive and receptive to this gift." This recognition creates a virtuous cycle where gratitude and favor feed each other. Start each day by specifically identifying 3 manifestations of God's favor in your life. It can be something extraordinary or seemingly common, recent, or past. This simple habit will train your spiritual eyes to recognize God's favor everywhere. The second essential practice is to develop an obedient and responsive heart. God's favor flourishes in the soil of obedience, not a legalistic obedience based on fear, but a loving responsiveness to divine principles. Observe how Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, Genesis 6:8 NKJV, and, in response to that favor, did according to all that God commanded him, Genesis 6:22 NKJV. His obedience didn't earn the favor, it was a response to the favor already received. This pattern repeats consistently in the lives of those who carry the divine sign. Favor precedes obedience, and obedience amplifies the manifestation of favor. A third vital practice is to cultivate authentic humility. Scripture clearly states God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble, James 4:6 NKJV. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking less about yourself and more about others and about God. It's recognizing that the favor you carry isn't the result of your own excellence, but a gracious gift to be stewarded wisely. It's understanding that you aren't the source of the favor, but a channel through which it flows. Pride blocks this flow, humility amplifies it. Another transformative practice is to live in intentional generosity. Remember the principle we explored. In the previous section, God's favor was designed to flow through you, not just to you. When you deliberately practice generosity, with your time, resources, talents, attention, you're aligning yourself with the fundamental purpose of the favor in your life. Generosity isn't just an expression of the favor you've already received. It's an invitation to even greater manifestations of that favor. Finally, cultivate a life of intimate and regular communion with God. God's favor flourishes in the context of relationship. It's not an impersonal force or a cosmic energy. It's the tangible expression of the goodness of a personal God who desires to relate intimately with you. The deeper your communion with the source of favor, the more fully that favor will manifest in your life. This communion is nurtured through practices like regular prayer, meditation on Scripture, sincere worship, and moments of contemplative silence in the divine presence. These aren't magic formulas to manipulate God's favor. but spiritual disciplines that align your heart, mind, and spirit with the source of all favor. They are practices that open the channels through which the favor already destined for you can flow without obstruction. By incorporating these practices into your daily life, you aren't trying to earn divine favor. You're creating the internal and external environment where the divine sign you already carry can shine with its maximum splendor. Chosen one, we've reached the end of this journey of revelation about the divine sign you carry. Throughout this time together, we've explored the multiple dimensions of God's favor in your life, how to recognize it, how it manifests in various circumstances, how it reveals your purpose, how it impacts others through you, and how it can be cultivated daily. Now is the moment to integrate all these truths into a unified vision of what it means to live fully as a bearer of this special sign in today's world. You haven't come to this understanding by accident. The recognition of God's favor in your life isn't just an intellectual understanding, it's a call to a higher way of living. It's an invitation to abandon the victim mentality and embrace your identity as a chosen one who carries a divine sign capable of transforming realities. This is the moment of decision. Will you continue living as if you're just another person trying to survive in a chaotic world, or will you fully embrace your identity as a bearer of divine favor, living consciously as a bearer of the divine? Sign doesn't mean you become superior to others or exempt from challenges. It means you navigate life with a constant awareness of divine presence and purpose operating through you. It means you face every situation, whether it's an exciting opportunity or a discouraging challenge, with the deep certainty that God's favor is working behind the scenes, transforming even the most adverse circumstances into stepping stones for your greater purpose. Imagine what your life would be like if you woke up each morning deeply conscious of the divine favor that accompanies you. How would you approach that difficult meeting? How would you respond to that challenging person? How would you face that seemingly impossible project? How would you handle that closed door or that unexpected disappointment? The awareness of divine favor doesn't eliminate these challenges, but it radically transforms your perspective and your response to them. The world desperately needs people who live this way, people who carry hope in times of despair, peace amidst chaos, purpose in a culture of alienation, generosity in a society of scarcity. The divine favor you carry isn't just for your personal benefit, it's a light destined to shine in dark places, a spring in barren lands, a shelter in stormy times. If this message has resonated in your heart, take a moment right now to reaffirm your identity as a bearer of the divine sign. Recognize the favor that is already operating in your life, even if you haven't fully noticed it until now. Commit to living each day conscious of that favor, to cultivating it through the practices we've explored, and to allowing it to flow freely through you to impact the world around you. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of God's favor in their own life. Leave in the comments a specific area where you're expectant to see God's favor manifest. And above all, live each day as who you truly are, a chosen one, a bearer of the divine sign, a channel through which heavenly favor can flow to transform not only your own reality, but also that of those God places in your path. God's favor isn't just something you have, it's something you are. Live from that identity and you'll see the world around you transformed by the divine sign you carry,